Hey everyone, I think let's get this started. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, that works better. We're going to get the meeting started. Just really quickly, I wanted to introduce myself. My name's Allie Burke. I live in Swan Creek with all of you. We're one house over from the DNR land, so Saturday was definitely, a big event for us. But I think the Facebook page has been really helpful to share information and connect with people, but sometimes it's just better to get everyone together so that we can talk about this constructively and figure out how we move forward as a community. I really appreciate all of you are here, and I really appreciate that so many of our officials have come. We have Mayor Richardson, Officer Morales, and we also have Nathan Kreplin from the Warden's office. So thank you so much. I had mentioned that I talked to Chief Morales on Monday and mentioned this meeting, and within 2 hours, I had an email saying that the mayor would be here, he would be here, the DNR would be here, so I do appreciate that we're getting so much support from you guys right now. So the way we're gonna do the meeting tonight is we'll start and we're gonna let them speak. We're gonna hear about Saturday night, any updates that they can share with us. I've specifically asked that the DNR can talk to us more about Nevin Springs and what's legal there and what's not legal, so that we all have a better understanding of what's happening here. After they speak, then we'll do a town hall style meeting. I know that we all have a lot of questions. I know that after they speak, some people might have more questions. If you could just hold those thoughts and let them finish in the essence of time so that we can get through everything. Once they're finished speaking, we can just queue up over here and take turns coming up to the podium if you want to share thoughts about what happened, thoughts how we go forward. We're open to talk about anything. That's what we're all here for. I think, just a reminder, I think, when we start talking about hunting and some of these issues, obviously they can be divisive issues. I know it's an ethical issue for some, so I hope we can just all be respectful for each other. We're all here to hear each other's thoughts and try to have a better understanding of how everyone feels so that we can more successfully move forward productively from what happened. So with that in mind, and then time-wise, I have the room until 8. I've told Cece I imagine we might run late. I think that's fine. If at the end of the meeting some people feel that they haven't had a chance to talk, or if we feel like we need to meet again, I'm more than happy to set something else up, whether it's here or virtually, but just want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here, especially. First, I just want to make sure you know a few of their council members who are here tonight. The two people on City Council that represent Swan Creek are Shannon Strassman and Jay Allen. They're both in the back, right there, waving their hands. And then we also have a couple other elders here. We have Randy Dell, who's our council president, and we also have Jim Wheeler, who also represents District 4. So these are some of the other people that are here to represent you and people you can go to. Thank you all for being here. I mean, obviously it's a very scary situation when houses are getting hit by gunfire. And as I thank the police department for jumping on this and really making this a priority as well. As we've kind of done some preliminary research, I think what's very clear is that we still don't know who it was that was doing the shooting, but it's very clearly not someone who was hunting. This isn't something that someone who's hunting is doing. There was too many shots, and I'll let them speak to that. So there's really an investigation on who is doing this. Any information anyone has, please let us know. And they have some information I believe they'll share about, kind of location and things like that. But that does kind of bring up a second issue, which is really a separate issue, but because of this incident, it's just something that we've really kind of thought about more, and something that I've already talked with the chief and the DNR about is changing the rules of hunting on that land, because there's a lot more housing that is in the area, not only Swan Creek, but you look where the fire station is and all the housing by that, and you look at Promega, and they continue to expand, and they're getting bigger and growing and coming close to this land. It's very clear to me that this is not an area that's suitable for using a firearm when hunting. And so that's something that we are working with the DNR about, is how do we change that rule so that, at this point we're thinking a bow and crossbow would still be something that could be used in that area. but it isn't a safe area and at this point in time for firearms, regardless of what it is, deer, squirrel, rabbit, whatever it is you might want to hunt. This isn't the place for it, because not only is that, but the trail goes to that area, and the trail is even more popular than ever. And so we want to make sure that it's a safe area. And most hunters are safe, but why even take that chance? It's just not worth it anymore. And so that's what we're working on, and hopefully we'll have some information on the steps for that. But I know that preliminary, the DNR is very open to making those changes. And I know as a city that we are very open to that. So with that said, I think I'll turn over to the department and Chief Morales to talk more about the investigation itself and what we know about the shots fired at that point. So, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Just by seeing the number of people that are here today and on camera, I know that it's extremely important to you. I'm going to tell you something. Didn't need for all of you to be here for it to be important to us. Before I get started on what I want to share with you, I want to give you some of the pieces on the agenda and how we're going to move forward. I'm going to discuss with you what we're doing as a police department to handle this situation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the crime that we're investigating, but then I'm going to pass it on to Deputy Chief Matt Leahy, who's going to discuss more on the ordinances that are currently there. And the investigation will be led more by Lieutenant Ned Hartwick, who will present to you on what we're doing on the investigation and where we're moving on that. Keep in mind that this is an open investigation. You're going to want details. But in an investigation, it's very difficult to give details. It's very difficult to give you evidence with no one in custody. That evidence is important when we confront that actor, if we get that actor into custody or actors, to confront them, and they say, well, you gave that out to the public. How are you going to be, how are we going to be able to pinpoint some of the things that occurred in this crime with that suspect or suspects if we tell everybody what we're doing? So we have to keep it confidential. But I want to also acknowledge some of the other people here. We have representatives from the DNR. We also have 2 additional alders, Woodell and Wheeler, that are present here today, and they had joined the aldermanic district that you're in. I think that's all we have for elected officials.
I mentioned all 4, yeah, Shannon.
Oh, you said all 4? Yes, okay. I heard the first 2. And we have detectives and officers present. If throughout the meeting here, we identify people that need to be interviewed to continue our investigation. So what we're investigating here, what are we investigating here? We're investigating a crime. That crime can be, what I'm pinpointing as one of 2 things, and it's all going to determine on the final outcome. We can do dangerous safety by use of a dangerous weapon. And that it could be shots fired into a home. But until we know the intent and the actions of that particular subject or subjects, we can determine if it's going to be that. That's a Class G felony, if I see it correctly. Yes, it's a Class F felony. There is also another crime that we can determine, and that's recklessly endangering safety by use of a dangerous weapon. And the reckless part is actually the actions that you are involved with, not necessarily need intent. But if I'm in an area, like for example, and I say I'm target shooting, but I'm not really taking into consideration my target and beyond, that could be reckless. So depending on when we complete our investigation, who we find accountable for this, the final crime will be determined. It is a crime that we're investigating, okay? 3 homes were struck, okay? And Lieutenant Harwood will talk about that. Now, I see some angry faces. I want to share with you a quick story before I pass the microphone on to others. These are things that have happened in other areas. I can tell you my personal experience on when it happened to me. I had my home built in 2000. I lived in that home for over 20 years. During my time in the home where I grew up, very similar to this neighborhood. It was on the far northwest side of Milwaukee. I had a heavily wooded area with a dry creek behind my home, and I enjoyed the wildlife that was coming through. On the other side of that were at least 20 acres or more of a high school campus that promoted agriculture, promoted livestock. There were cattle, just a couple horses, things of that nature to promote that type of lifestyle with the student body. At nighttime, you may or may not hear one shot fired. And this was an area where several city employees lived. Most often when you heard that, nobody really took too much care about it, thinking it's a poacher that will get caught. And oftentimes the poachers were caught. But that escalated now to multiple shots fired. And I want you to take this into consideration because we all are going to speculate what happened there. The reality is we're investigating what happened there. We can't jump to conclusions. I'm just going to tell you what happened in my situation. My residence was very similar to the residents that are here. My son would do his homework on that dinette table with his back to the patio door to the backyard that oversaw, if you can describe what you see here, the wooded area, the grasslands. 5 minutes before midnight, he goes to sleep. My daughter is also in bed, and my wife. 5 minutes later, the shots rang out, those shots that were fired, and they were escalating, went through the patio door and through our living room window. There were at least 3 shots fired, one of them through the chair where my son was sitting prior to that. So if you don't think I'm taking this serious, you're thinking wrong. I am taking this very serious. Okay? I did not get to watch or even thought about watching the football game on Sunday. My focus was on what happened here, because I don't want to happen to you to happen the way it happened to me. Nobody really cared. Came from a city where that doesn't get taken seriously. Okay? That traumatized my son and my daughter and my wife. Not only did it traumatize, nobody really put much attention in investigating. I had to do things on my own to get help to find those individuals, and they were found, and they were apprehended. And I'm telling you this because I want the same type of energy that I see here today. The individuals that were caught, one did not have a criminal record, but was purchasing guns for 2 additional suspects who did have felony records. These subjects also chose the life of the sale of drugs. The individuals would buy guns from this one individual and they go test them, what do you think? In the rural area of the city. Okay? They knew nothing about guns, about direction of knowing your target and beyond. They thought they were shooting in a wooded area. Those rounds went through and struck my house. So when it came to charging time, I can give you a number of different crimes that they could have been charged with. Being a law enforcement officer, I can't get involved because otherwise people say, hey, you're choosing favoritism. So I had to be the bystander like you. They didn't get charged with the charges that I was looking to get charged. Not only that, now it gets to the judge and they plead even less. And now one of those 3 individuals were held accountable. Yes, they pled guilty. They went out. The judge said I would be receiving restitution, and the judge said I would be receiving an apology letter. That happened in 2017. I'm still here. I got no apology letter. The courts and the district attorney's office, if the Lord permits us to complete this investigation and take somebody into custody, it's going to take what we see here and you to be there. And as much as you're going to vent to us, that needs to be vented to them and say, this has to stop. Because it takes you, not us together maybe, to make sure we find resolution and that this doesn't happen. I'm taking it very serious. And I hope that the children, if any of them were impacted, that we're able to work with you to make sure that they can move on from this situation and not live the life of worries that mine did, because there was nobody there for them. And you're hearing it from a law enforcement officer that has 29 years of service in this profession. So to start off, we are taking it serious. And you better believe we're going to do everything we can. It's a difficult investigation, but the more of you that get involved in helping us with information that you hear, the more we'll push. And don't think that with the evidence that we have now, that a month from now, if we don't have it solved, that we forgot about it. Some of these things take some time. in these subjects that were involved. It's just a matter of time before they do something again, and we're able to put the pieces together. So bear with us. I thank you, Ally, for putting this together. This is your meeting. This is the Swan Creek neighborhood. The Fitchburg Police Department did not bring you together. It was Ally. And thank you for letting us be a part of your meeting. We'll move on to Deputy Chief Matt Leahy and then Lieutenant Ed Harwick. You want to switch it? Okay.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. I see many familiar faces out there. You've had to suffer through my presentations at your Homeowners Association meetings. And so I'm here tonight to talk about a much different subject and understandably very concerning, not only to you, but to us as well. And so one of the questions that I think Ally posed in speaking with Chief Morales was what happened from our perspective, right? Because everyone comes into the situation with different perspectives. We don't live in your neighborhood. We're privileged to serve your neighborhood and this entire community. But we are faced with our own realities and challenges on any given day. And so I wanted to just give you a little bit of insight before we get into the investigation to how things transpired from our point of view. I will share this with you just so you have everybody's contact information. Again, my name is Ned Hartwick. I'm a lieutenant and I oversee our detectives and basically everything else other than our patrol officers, dispatch, and all of our other support services. Deputy Chief Matt Leahy will be speaking here shortly. And then I also have Lieutenant Copeland's contact information on here as well, so we'll make that accessible to everybody. So we'll start with the incident, just to provide some context here because we often hear some interesting answers as it relates to the amount of staffing that we have on in the city at any given time. And I also want to highlight too that we provide services to the city here based on geography with the intent that officers get to know and focus on specific areas of the city and have resources appropriately available. Recently we have switched our model to in anticipation of the attachment of the town of Madison, which is less than 30 days away here. And so your neighborhood, Swan Creek, lies in our east district here, which as you can see, the far right here is rather large. Our city is 35 square miles. And so the officer that's working in east has quite a bit of ground to cover. That evening, we had 1 sergeant and 4 officers working for the entire city. I'm not going to test your vision here. I can break some of this down for you. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is how things unfolded from our perspective, keeping in mind that these 4 officers and 1 sergeant started their busy evening that night with a burglary on the west side of the city. And so all the officers were over there. And around 5:11 p.m. Is the first call that we received regarding damage to a home, and that was the home on Buttonbush. 1 officer was able to break from that burglary and respond to take that report. While that officer was in Swan Creek, the second call came in around 5:24 p.m. And through brief investigation, they learned that likely occurred right around the same time as that first report. So just a little bit of a delay. Shortly after that, a large disturbance came in on the north side of our city, which diverts resources to the north side of our city there. And we still had the 1 officer investigating both incidents there. As officers were able to clear from that disturbance, then additional officers came to the area, recognizing that that weekend happened to be the youth hunt weekend, and that there was some possibility that maybe there was someone in the natural area that could have been still there, and that was the original approach that was taken. So officers are checking the bike path, they're checking parking lots, and looking for people that may be associated with this incident. During some of those contacts, they encountered some bow hunters who basically informed them that, yeah, they heard some gunshots, but no, they did not see anyone. They couldn't necessarily pinpoint exactly where those were coming from. Shortly after they were really in the area checking, the third call comes in indicating that there was also a delay in that, and that was also likely in that first sequence of events earlier in the evening with about an hour delay, so that was around 6:30. We have another call come in that came in around 7:16 p.m. That takes some officers up there. And then really what really became concerning for folks is around 7:35 p.m. We started receiving a series of phone calls, 18 in total, reporting numerous shots fired. And so at that point, there was a desire to get a lot more resources in that involved calling other officers in that were working the oncoming shift. I think we were able to make contact at that point with conservation wardens, and we started reaching out for other additional resources to help investigate, including a drone from the City of Madison Police Department and members of our own drone team to come in and operate our drones to help check the area. So again, from 7:35 to roughly around 8:25 p.m., we received 18 calls. So when the other thing that we have to consider too, and if there's anyone in the room that called, I apologize if you were maybe put on hold or maybe felt like you weren't getting the attention, but keep in mind we have one person working in that dispatch center if you're calling a non-emergency number. So I want to highlight right here that our officers are right now, and during this call, if you can put yourself in an officer's shoes, they're out there in the dark in a wooded area. They're hearing multiple shots fired themselves, and they're being asked to go into this environment and to look for people involved. I also have a dispatcher that's sitting alone at a dispatch center trying to manage and triage all these phone calls. So our entire team that night, in my opinion anyway, was going above and beyond, going into an unknown circumstance to try to respond and investigate these calls of shots fired. The efforts continued into the evening here to try to locate anyone, and after checking parking lots and clearing the area with drones, we were able to determine that there likely wasn't anyone in the area that we were looking at any longer. So again here, just to cover a few points here, I apologize, I actually have an incorrect time in here. The first call was at 5:11 p.m. and this was on Buttonbush. There was damage to a north-facing window frame. The second call is the one that occurs at 5:24 p.m. and we realize that there's a 10-minute delay or so. This incident round occurred down on Stoneman Drive. One round entered the mid-level of the north side of the home and it ended up going to a bathtub. Ended up on the bathroom floor. The third call, which occurred at 6:30 p.m., and we determined it had about an hour delay, was on Sunflower Drive, just north of the Stoneman address. And then this one, the round entered the upper level of the north side of the home and ended up in a closet floor. Again, the fourth call here, we had 18 calls. And I zoomed out here on the map a bit. This indicate that we did receive one phone call from Goodland Park Road, which is a bit of a distance. And I'll talk about why that might be a little of significance here shortly. So the investigation, and if I can get this to play from here. I know most of you are probably very familiar having riding bikes or living next to this area, but I just want to give a little bit of perspective to what real estate we're talking about here and what the current environment looks like. One of our drone pilots, Detective Sean Coffey, is actually the lead on this case and was able to capture this today. But this perspective, I think, gives everyone a good understanding of what the situation looks like on the ground right now. The bike path is up over here. This is actually a paved access road to an MG&E station back here. And this is a grass path that comes back here, and you can see some additional paths that have been cut through here either by game or by...
The camera's facing west.
Yeah.
So on a map, obviously this looks a little bit different than seeing it from that perspective and actually having that flyover there. So I just wanted to give everybody that context as to what that is. So I know a lot of people are understandably interested in what the investigation, what was actually done. I think I'd heard some concern that nothing was being taken seriously and that we weren't paying any attention to what was going on. So I can tell you that I spent the better part of Sunday here with Detective Coffee, and we had a DNR warden out on Sunday in the daylight to start evaluating what we were actually dealing with. Again, I can't emphasize enough the size of the potential area where these rounds came from, and really trying to piece together the information that we knew at that time to try to figure out what resources we might need in the future and what follow-up would be necessary. We also had our patrol officers that were working that day basically walked and or drove most all of the bike path and a lot, if not all, of the footpaths that are in that area of the wildlife area next to your neighborhood. On Monday, if you wanted to be out in the woods without worry of having a DNR warden popping up in some place outside, you would have a fairly good shot because there was a very heavy presence of wardens here, very interested in assisting the investigation, that have some technical skills just based on their familiarity with other types of investigations related to hunting incidents. They were able to lend their expertise in searching for evidence and analyzing damage to the homes and the evidence that we collected. We were able to collect 2 rounds from 2 of the homes and analyze those. As we narrowed down some potential areas based on the analysis of that evidence, we were able to utilize 3 canine units from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Police Department. They are explosives detection canines. However, as a part of that ability to indicate on that odor, they're also able to indicate on spent shell casings. So a dog's nose is phenomenal. It can detect a drop of blood in a swimming pool. And I would probably give the analogy that detecting a spent shell casing in the property that we just had a flyover of would probably be pretty similar. So they came out, they scoured the area with the assistance of a warden, and we conducted a fairly extensive search of the area and adjacent private property. So the big question that everyone likely has here is, what is the current status of the investigation? And so there are a few things that I can say. As Chief Morales indicated, we can't go into a ton of details, but I can tell you with a fair degree of certainty on a number of things. We don't have any reason to believe that any homes were intentionally targeted. Okay. I think that is first and foremost. It doesn't necessarily make anyone feel any better about the fact that homes were struck, but we don't have any indication right now, any information to believe that anyone was intentionally firing at homes. We also, at this point, don't have any information based on some analysis of evidence that we have any reason to believe that the shots that were fired came from any adjacent private property. I will also point out, without going into great detail, that the recovered rounds there were not in compliance with the regulations that the DNR has for hunting and legitimate use of that land with firearms. And then, if you can recall, I talked about the Goodland Park call reporting the shots fired here. There is a very distinct possibility that the series of gunshots that were reported after the hours of darkness may not have actually been related or in the same exact area as the original shots that ended up striking homes. So I will let Deputy Chief Lay talk about our ordinance.
Good evening, everybody. I haven't had the privilege of engaging with you that Lieutenant Hartwick has had in the past, but I welcome everybody here, and I'm very pleased to see the turnout, and everybody has vested interest in the occurrence that occurred on Saturday night. Just to provide a little bit more context regarding some of the words that Chief Morales had said regarding we are investigating a crime. To provide a little bit more information regarding the use of firearms in the city of Fitchburg, and one of the things he had said was he does not believe that this incident was related to hunting. and that provides a little bit more background to our actual ordinance in the city of Fitchburg. So I'm not going to drone on and read this word for word for you. Everybody can probably read this just fine. However, there is an exception to the discharging of firearms in the city of Fitchburg, which could lend to some further conversation if, as the mayor alluded to, moving on, trying to take some sort of action on limiting what goes on in the Nevin Springs wildlife area as far as what can or can't be used for hunting. But some of the exceptions are for skeet and trap shooting courses. But however, to use a firearm for those particular instances, they have to have permission in writing from the Common Council and the owner of the land. And the final one is for hunting purposes during lawful hunting seasons within the provisions provided by the state, specifically the DNR. So if it were a target practice incident, that still would not be allowed even in that Nevin Springs area. It has to be specifically for hunting purposes. And of course, the Nevin Springs has specific calibers, specific types of rounds that can and can't be used in that particular area.
Well, again, like Chief and Deputy Chief and Lieutenant Hardwick, thanks everybody for being here. I'm the Warden Supervisor that covers all of Dane County and Greene and Columbia County as well. We have 4 field wardens here in Dane County as well. And, just like the Fitchburg PD, we're taking the situation very seriously as well too, and we're certainly willing to offer any assistance that we can. But I just wanted to touch a little bit. So I've talked to several people, probably several of you are in the room tonight, with questions that have called and asked about, what is legal there, what isn't legal. So I just wanted to just touch on some of that really quickly. So first and foremost, what you need to know about that property is, as Deputy Chief just talked about with the overall ordinance for the city of Fitchburg, we're not allowed to be less restrictive than that ordinance, but we certainly can be more restrictive. And actually what is allowed on that property is more restrictive than the rest of the city of Fitchburg. So as Deputy Chief alluded to, there is no target practicing allowed out on that property. There's no target practicing allowed, period, on any of our state lands here in Dane County. And as far as weapons go, the only weapons that are legal to be used on that property are shotguns that shoot only fine shot or BBs, the shotgun shell that shoots out several BBs, not like one single projectile. So for those of you that aren't real familiar with shotguns, the trajectory or the distance that they travel is not nearly what a rifle would be, all right? No rifles are allowed at all, and the only other gun that would be legal on that property is a muzzleloader. All right, and for those of you that aren't familiar with muzzleloaders, it's a single shot, one single projectile that's placed in there. Think of kind of old times black powder musket type things. Okay, they've advanced in technology a little bit, but they're still only allowed to shoot one round. And then it takes some time to have to reload, put a new round in, and everything like that with powder. So. And then obviously bows and crossbows are legal as well too. So, and that's basically what is allowed out there. Okay. As one of the officers alluded to, it was the youth hunting weekend for deer. And again, to be legal to hunt deer out there, it would again have to be bow, crossbow, or a muzzleloader. Okay, those would be the only weapons that would be legal for that out there. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing that I just wanted to touch on too is had a lot of questions about, there was some misinformation out there about a special night hunt that was organized. There was no specialized organized night hunt of any kind. In fact, the only thing legal to hunt right now on that property at night would be coyotes. Their coyote season is open year round, and even if they were hunting coyotes, they would have to fall in line with one of those weapon choices. And none of those weapons are very conducive for hunting coyotes, especially in the way that they're being I know Chief and the mayor talked about, maybe it's time to look for some change in that. I will say that I've talked to our wildlife biologist, and basically we go through what's called a master planning process. And the last time that some master planning process was done on that property was 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago in 2000. And I was told that there will be another master planning process coming up fairly soon. I don't know what that means, but fairly soon is what I was told. That master planning process, it takes a long period of time. Usually they're somewhere around 2 years from start to finish. And with that master planning process, they take in a lot of input from the public. I actually pulled up the one from 20 years ago and looked through all 89 pages of it. And there was extensive comments in there from the public. So I'm sure that will be coming up again, and you all will have, that want to, will certainly have the opportunity to provide input as well with that. And I can give you contact information, for who you should reach out to find out kind of who's running that and when that may be coming up as well too. So, but with that, that's what I'll have to cover. So, thank you.
All right, so I think at this point, if anyone would like to share thoughts or ideas or talk about anything, just feel free to queue up. I think it's best and just come up to the podium so that we only have one speaker at a time, and I think we can keep it a little more organized. Or if you have questions, I'm assuming you guys are open to take any questions as well tonight. So, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, of course. Go, Ron.
I have a 14 or 15-year-old, you don't know me, single man, that need to be fed yet. Let's walk here quickly, I promise. I live on 9 Bark Drive, and I was one of the calls for one of the later ones. A couple of comments, just so everybody has the same information. It will be a couple of years before the next master plan comes out, but you can change a master plan with a petition. So if the petition is signed and submitted, they can change the Conservation Congress can change rules. One of the things I'd like to propose though too here is that there was a time where there was signage as you approach the area from the east coming in, where not only did it say there's houses ahead when you're coming back out, don't shoot this way, but it said shotgun only. And that signage is gone. So some people may not know that. I propose that we could get signage back over there again on the trails coming in that say it says shotgun only. The other thing is there's a comment on Facebook today about encountering some people with pellet guns. My understanding would be that shooting small game with pellet guns would not be allowed at all either. It's not just muzzleloaders, and there's no small game hunting with pellet guns in that area at this point either, correct?
Yeah, and they wouldn't fall within what was allowable there.
That's what I thought. Not only that, if you're not aware, you can buy a pellet gun with a .45 caliber bullet in it that shoots at the same foot per second as a regular gun. They're kind of a loophole in the law that probably needs to be straightened out at some time. So pellet guns are going to be used, or you encounter people with pellet guns. Those are not necessarily things that we should be seeing. Other than that, I walk my dog. If you've seen my 1-year-old 80-pound yellow lab, wasn't supposed to be that big. Up in that area 3 times a day. If anybody knows what a lab is like, he requires about 9 miles of walking. So heavy teenagers is good. But the hunters I encountered, they're all nice. They're all respectful. I used to hunt when I had time. So I'm not necessarily anti-hunting, but I also agree that maybe it's time to look at the change. And again, if you don't want to wait for 2 years to wait for the next master plan coming up, you need to get a petition together and petition the Conservation Congress to change the current master plan. So it can still be done. With that being said, I gotta go find food. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ron.
You bet.
I'll just add on to something that Ron had said. Ron and I had talked on the phone, and he had brought up the signage issue as well too. And certainly, we're all about wanting to put as many signs on our property as we can. And he, as he alluded to, there used to be signs there. Those signs disappear, get shot, broken, stolen, whatever. But we'll be more than open to putting more signage up there, saying what weapons are allowed. Houses over here, we've done that on other properties too, and I know that our wildlife staff will certainly be willing to do that as well too.
I do want to mention that that was a comment said by several people. So I'm glad you brought it up because we forgot to mention that, but it has been brought up throughout the last few days.
Yeah, you just feel free to head right up if you have a comment, please.
So my name is Greg. I live here one time. I'm one of the original owners. So it's about 18 years now. So I kind of know what used to be, what it is now. About 95% of talk here is about natural area, and almost none, like 2 lines of that was about private properties, okay? Let me say this. I spend a lot of time out there. I don't hunt, but I'm a biker, I'm a runner, I'm always out there. And over this my almost 18 years old, almost annually I know we have shooting coming from the exact same location. And location is private property just north of that DNR area, which is, it's public information, 2965 South Sain Road. It's all one line. You can get up, crossing over or whatever. So they have some kind of weird business there, some kind of pile of sand, brush. It's 20 acres. So it happened to me, my wife, when you go biking or riding, whatever, on bike trail, there would be shots coming from that private property. Okay? So this Saturday, I was in my backyard, and between 4 and 6, I'm doing whatever I'm doing in my backyard. This semi-automatic fire. I mean, you're talking about right? I mean, hunting is really no issue for you guys. You're talking about illegal, semi-automatic fire. I'm not sure what they're doing there. Probably shouldn't be against, which they should not be doing. But basically my point is this time around, bullets came our way. But if you're a biker, very well, bullets can be coming that way as well. You just don't know. Right? It's number one. Number two, we got 3 hits, but granted, I heard 50 to 100 shots myself. Chances are pretty good. There are the bulls out there. They probably just landed on some roofs, backyards. Who knows? I mean, those are not accounted for. Chances are someone's gonna call tomorrow morning because they have a roof leak. Guess what? Because there's a bullet hole in there. That's a possibility as well. So, but back to my point, there's private property over there, and I don't believe. I mean, I rather believe. I would say there's something going on with property, and it has been happening for years. But this time around, it was like 10 times bigger than it used to be. So like, I'm just there, okay, fine, you guys shooting, not my business, but this time around, maybe it is my business anymore. That's why I'm here talking. So I would like you guys to actually take a look at this property again. I'm sure people are gonna say, look, you don't know nothing, but the issue is they can say whatever they want. It's not necessarily factual. So that's my point. Just take a look at the property again. I mean, I'm sure you have ways to search it better, but that's what it is.
I just wanted to clarify some things too with historical. I may be new here, but Ned and Matt are not. Here's what I want to clarify, perception and reality. If you're hearing these shots, if these things are happening, they need to be reported. When we're hearing people say, last year this happened, and the year before this happened, and last spring, we're looking for, all of this is computerized. We're not finding some of the incidents, if many, on these calls. The whole thing also, going back, if you see something, say something. These calls are recorded, information that we're digging for history to see if they can link us to something. I'm not saying anybody here is being, is prior information. These things may have happened, but if they didn't get reported, they didn't happen for us to follow up on. So moving forward, things like these happen. Please report them. Please call me. Even if you don't get a police officer right there, it's recorded. It's something for us to fall back on and look for things.
I'm Randy Hager. I'm on Sunflower. My property backs up to the DNR land. And I can always tell when small game starts or something, first weekend in September, it's multiple shots, and it's not musket or a shotgun. It is bang, bang, bang. 3, maybe 4 shots in a row. It's either 4 guys standing there with a shotgun shooting at something, or it's someone with an automatic rifle. And it happens, but then it goes away, right? After 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, you don't hear it. But it's mostly every Saturday morning and like this Sunday morning also. Well, someone needs to check out response of what's out there.
I can answer, I guess, some of your questions or concerns. So the first weekend in Saturday, usually it's September 1st,
Yeah.
we do have an early teal season. Teal are a type of duck. And that's probably what you're hearing. Could be dove as well. Dove also opens up during that time. So you're right, it could be multiple hunters together. Also a shotgun, when you're hunting waterfowl or doves, you are allowed to carry 3 rounds in your shotgun. And a semi-automatic shotgun or even a pump shotgun, I can probably fire 3 rounds from a pump shotgun in a matter of 3 seconds too. So just because you're hearing that, I understand your concern, but it could be a legal weapon for that property. I'm not saying that it couldn't be either, but like Chief said, same thing goes for us. If you guys suspect target shooting or something illegal, call our DNR hotline number as well too. We do have a hotline number. It's staffed, answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And they'll document that as well. And one of us will check it out. It might not be that exact moment. Like I said, there is only 4 of us in the county, but we'll get to it, or else we'll put some man hours into it and kind of watch the property as well. And I will say that, since our office is right there, we do check that property fairly often. And compared to a lot of our other state lands and natural areas in the county, that one does not get nearly the amount of use as some of the other ones. To you, it probably seems like a ton of use, and I understand that. But traditionally, we have not really encountered, rarely ever, problems with illegal firearms. Not saying that it never happens, but it's rare. Most of the people are pretty good about abiding by that. I get calls numerous times a year with people asking, what can I use out there? So people do take it into consideration for what it's worth.
Just a quick question. Are there hours for hunting?
There are.
So if we hear shots, say at 4 in the morning, that would be abnormal?
The only thing that somebody could be hunting at that time of day would be right now coyote, or when the raccoon or fox season were to open up too. That's a species that they can hunt at night too. Just so you're aware, they can't run around like just shooting at stuff or whatever. They have to be stationary. They can only use a light, right at the point of dispatching, whatever they're hunting for. So there is legal hunting hours, depending on what it is. They're usually right around, just to play it safe, about sunrise to sunset. If it's waterfowl, if it's deer, it's 20 minutes after sunset. You might think, well, how is that safe? But sunset is well before dark. So 20 minutes after dark is usually, just starting to get towards dusk. So.
If you want the people to hear that, I'm not thinking about it.
I think they can hear, yeah.
For the cameras.
In your experience, what are the odds of DNR changing a property like this to not being hunting property? Is it happening quite often, or is it so hard to do? We just heard so many rumors. I'm just curious.
I'll just, for people maybe online, the question is, what are the odds of changing it? Is that something that happens often? What's the likelihood of that?
So great question. It's hard for me to speak on that just because I don't deal, with that a whole lot. But I will say that a lot of times our properties are bought with certain funds, and I'm not 100% sure about that property. But when they are bought with certain funds, like Pittman Robinson funds, there is a requirement, to open those properties for hunting generally. As far as saying that, we're going to close it completely, I don't know. There is a process for that through the master planning process or through our Conservation Congress process, which is open to everybody. Any citizens can make a resolution, and then it goes through a process to become law as well too. So, we're all about public safety, and we want the people to be able to feel safe around our properties, but also make sure that it's being used for those activities as well too. So I'm sure that we'll be willing to work with your association and try to find probably some sort of common ground to make everybody feel a little bit more safe about it. But to be able to say that it can be closed, I can't really answer that.
Is it common to have hunting grounds so close to subdivisions, or is this unusual?
Well, it's hard to say. You got to remember when that property first opened up, there was no neighborhood, right? So it's really hard to say. It is one of our smaller properties too, versus a lot of our other wildlife areas are much bigger and a little bit more rural. So it is a unique one for sure.
Are there any properties where the hunting time is maybe much shorter, that we would be able to say these hours in the morning are for hunting, and then us in the neighborhood would know that then if later after 10 a.m. or things like that, personally I've lived in the neighborhood for 5 years, and I have never really thought about wearing glazed orange or things like that. I live on Big Bluestone Parkway and just usually do the little loop with my dog. But now obviously after this, I'm I don't know if I'll take my son out there if I do know that there could be any shooting. So I think my husband loves to go out and hunt there as well, bow hunt. So I totally get that should be protected. But are there any properties where it's the time is restricted so that we would have residential time?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
If a biker or jogger got shot by a hunter, what would happen then?
Well, if anybody gets shot by anybody, there's going to be an investigation. And like Chief had talked about, there's certain, could be reckless endangerment, reckless use of a weapon. Could be potentially, a homicide or something like that. There's a ton of different situations. It's hard to really speculate. But yes, under most circumstances, we would investigate and determine, fault, intent, all those kind of things go into play. But, we really try and preach, the 4 rules of firearm safety. People are required to go through a hunter safety course before they can go out and hunt. We talk and preach those rules of firearm safety, and one of those 4 rules of firearm safety is be sure of your target and what's beyond. So if someone's shooting recklessly and not, being cognizant of what their target is and beyond, they certainly can be held liable for that.
Could you speak to the direction that, or where the shots were coming from? Were they all coming from the north of the neighborhood?
We really don't know. And that's kind of Fitchburg's, they're the lead on the investigation, but we've had so many different reports. Like Lieutenant had alluded to, the second round of shots in the evening could have come from a different place. We're not sure.
Is the
I think-
shots
I think we can say that the rounds that struck homes where we were able to recover rounds, we're able to give a pretty positive direction in the sense that it's coming from the north. And we're able, that's one of the things that we're factoring in is determining, what range that could have possibly come from. But as we've talked about that second round of shots, we have officers, keep in mind at that point, we have officers in the area that are very nearby all of this and some properties that have come into question. And people hear things differently, and echoes and wind and all those factors can kind of complicate the ability to really pinpoint audibly where things are coming from. But I can say with a high degree of certainty based on what we're able to collect and the analysis of that those first initial rounds were coming almost directly north.
Do you think the 8 o'clock shots, was that legal? Was that illegal? You said it's a different investigation. Are you investigating those?
Well, yeah, no, it's not necessarily a different investigation. I would go so far as to say that there's a distinct possibility that they're unrelated. But yet, obviously, those shots fired are still illegal based on the reports that we're hearing, the fact that they're likely not coming from a shotgun or a muzzle loader based on the frequency of those shots. So, unfortunately, I think we all see the news reports each morning of shots fired throughout Dane County. And whether you're driving home on the Beltline at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or, sitting at home, there are sometimes those incidents where those shots are being fired regardless of location. So keep in mind too, much like a lot of Fitchburg, there is this space between what is rural and residential, and then we get into a much more populated area where there's lots more traffic and a lot of other factors that are going on, including the Beltline. So we're taking a look at everything on that.
Is that property stocked, like with pheasants and whatnot? And are there times of the year, you mentioned opening a duck season, for example, are there times of the year where we might expect more legal shotgun shots, depending on the season that might be open?
Yeah, as far as I know, that property is not one of the properties that we do release pheasants. That prairie area directly, north of like Buttonbush area, and from my experience, that part of the property is probably one of the more least hunted parts of the property. Just looking at that habitat there really are no pheasants there, and if there are, they're few and far between. As far as habitat for small game, rabbits, squirrels, they're not going to be living too much in the grass prairie area. Dove hunting may go on there, that wouldn't surprise me here and there, but the majority of it is on the other side of the bike path, more down in that marshy, swampy, tough to get to area as well. And that's what I've been here 21 years in Dane County as a warden, and that's from my experience what I've seen.
So I'm not much of a gun guy, so this might be a dumb question. What's the farthest away that a rifle could have been instead of struck
Depending on the caliber of rifle, depending on the trajectory that the round was shot, rifle rounds can travel miles.
So just from the conversation, first, thank you all too for presenting and taking the time. Had the opportunity to speak to the lieutenant on Sunday when you were out investigating Jen's house. You just mentioned earlier, the subdivision really wasn't there when this was zoned for hunting. Now we are here, and the majority of the hunters, I've been here for over 10 years, have been very responsible, and you would hate for a bad egg to spoil the lot. But nonetheless, bullets fell in the neighborhood, and like you mentioned earlier, that's pretty restrictive already, but rifles were being used irresponsibly in that neighborhood. So I wonder if it's up to us as a community to call in, make our positions known. I don't know if that could just be zoned for just bow and crossbow and just remove any gun hunting on that land. But yeah, Saturday was definitely a live day for sure, more than what it normally is. And I think all of us are accustomed to hearing shotguns on there.
And the muzzle
But-
things.
Yeah, but there's going to probably be a lot of calls coming in now anytime we hear gunfire going off.
Yeah, and you said some important things there. You talked about, that most hunters are respectful and want to do the right thing because you don't want, one bad egg to spoil it for everybody. And I would agree with that, especially in a situation like that. I think that they generally try to use extra caution because they know what they have there. Like Lieutenant had alluded to, I think the one thing, that I hope you guys walk away from, tonight is knowing that this, I am confident in saying that this was not related to hunting. From my experience and listening to what I heard, especially in the later on times, I can pretty confidently say that this was not related to hunting. There's a lot of things going on right now in Dane County. We can speculate, what those rounds could have been. It could have been a whole variety of different reasons, but I am fairly confident that they weren't related to hunting.
What's the distance away from our housing area? Like the bike path is right next to Prairie on the north side. I live on Buttonbush, so I have vested interest too. But I never see a hunter. I mean, I never see them. What is the distance they're supposed to maintain from that bike path to where they hunt? Is it like 300 yards or so? It's some...
I'm not 100% sure what the distance is for the bike path, but I can tell you from your homes, there is a requirement that no firearm can be discharged within 100 yards or 300 feet of any residence that's basically occupied. So without permission anyway, and there is that requirement.
Just your question. There are no signs.
There's signs. There's a couple signs.
Towards the bike trail? No. That's a problem.
They're facing
if
away
you bike
from the
trail,
bike trail.
there are no signs. So if you're bike trail, you're fair game. That's a problem.
This individual would not have
if you go on a
been
weekend and biking, you're fair game because there are no signs. But another point is, when you're talking about shotguns, you have to understand that high power arrow bow is much more powerful than shotgun BBs. I mean, 2 times bigger, these arrows, right? So I'd rather be shot by BBs than by arrows. Just my point. Serious. So if you're talking about the shotgun thing, I mean, arrow is much dangerous than shots.
The one thing that should make you feel comfortable about bow hunting is the effective range for most bows or even crossbows. Most bow hunters are not shooting more than 40 yards away, and most of them are shooting from an elevated area, which means the rounds are going down into the ground as well too versus up. So that should make you feel a little bit safer.
Right. And the issue is our area, like I know a bunch of trails over there. And I walk in sometimes, like I know how to get to actually Swan Creek. You guys go to Swan Creek. Check it out. It's a beautiful nature thing. But you need to know the trail too. The thing is, if I go there, I better be wearing some kind of orange thing because otherwise, right now, I mean, it's shocking if somebody's out there because like, when I'm biking, like 2 weeks ago I was biking and there were shots and walking through a bike trail. I mean, somebody was hunting like this. Which they may because or not, but if I go, if I find a weird trail over there, in this right here, I've become kind of endangered animal. So those kind of points come up.
Yeah, and just to address those concerns. So again, kind of going back to what we teach and preach in hunter safety, is really identifying and knowing your target, not just shooting at whatever moves. Because most of our hunters are out there hunting because they want to harvest some sort of game, usually for consumption, right? And if they're just wildly shooting, most of the time they're not going to be able to retrieve that as well. So most of our hunters are good at identifying, what they're shooting at, and making it the best shot that they can make in a vital area so that they can be successful. So I would say, pretty confidently that most people just aren't shooting at movement or sound or anything like that. But certainly blaze orange is always a great idea, and I would encourage anybody that walks on that property, hunting or not hunting, during any hunting season, to at least throw on a blaze orange hat or something like that would be a good idea.
I wanted to ask, sorry, I'm losing my voice as well, but I was one of the houses that got struck, and I just wanted to ask how likely it is that somebody like this would be caught, because I would imagine, like, I have no doubt it's a crime. I don't think it was a hunting accident, to be honest, and I think everything that you presented is pretty clear. So I know you said, like, for your family, the people were found, but is it like a 10% chance? Like, I know it's hard to give a ballpark, but I just was wondering what the likelihood would be.
It's hard to tell, but I will tell you that what we're doing, the way the evidence is being processed, if any law enforcement agency comes in contact with that, will be, or any part of this investigation that'll lead us to in that direction.
Okay.
But that takes time. And if there were somebody that were acting in a reckless manner, they're probably going to act in a reckless manner again. Yeah. And it's just a matter of when they get caught. And evidence will be able to link it back together to that. In my case, it took 2 weeks for them to come back and get caught.
Do you want to talk about the database that because we have the caliber?
Yes. There's a system that we have, and we've been starting to work on it here in Dane County. I'd say probably within the last this last year, and that's the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. It's a fingerprinting system for guns, firearms. And what we're able to do with that is once it gets entered into that system, we're able to, if that firearm is recovered anywhere else in the country, we're able to link it together. And oftentimes firearms do travel. We've had success rates with cases that are over a year old, but we're able to link it to incidents in Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, and it's been helping us here in the area of Fitchburg. Some prairies also having success with it. So we'll continue using that information network, that system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any way to temporarily suspend seasons or spaces for hunting until we can further understand and study what's going on?
So there is, under some emergency rules, that would have to be approved much higher than my level. There's always, emergency rules that can certainly close a property if needed.
And to follow on this fine gentleman's question, as a mayor, right, does the city take a position here? Is the city going to help us, or is it really up to us as a community? I live on Buttonbush too, right? I hear so many gunshots, like I don't report them. I just if I reported every one, you guys can stop taking my calls.
Yeah, it's constant during the season.
Right. So,
Do you want us to call each time?
Yeah, I think that's what I heard is absolutely call each time. And it is the city, we are working towards eliminating firearms. Now, on that property, yes, on that property. And the challenging thing is that sound does carry. I remember a few years ago, people were complaining about kids in the neighborhood blasting music. Well, it was actually music from Camp Randall. And so the sound does carry, so not all shotgun shells are coming from that area, but I think we do want to know when that's happening, and because we'll do the best we can to track that down. As a city, yes, we are working towards working with the DNR to removing all firearms from being used on that property, so that going forward, once I don't know how long it's going to take. Hopefully it's quick. It's not going to be 5-10 years or anything like that. But by doing that, we'll at least enable you, I think, at that point too, to say, okay, there is some shooting happening. It sounds pretty close, and we know that this property is not allowed anymore. And so hopefully that reduces the number of shots as well. Yeah. But then, if there is something happening, then we're able to go and do that. So we are working on doing that, make that change. Yeah.
My question is for the police here. So we have our Facebook group, and I know that I posted like what I heard that night in the moment at 8 o'clock. I believe that it was a 223 round at 8 o'clock. followed by other shots. You guys have other officers in the area that probably already heard that as well. Do you guys use our, like that? Because I recorded it for documentation purposes. Like I was walking my dog, I heard the shots, I came back to the house, you know, here's my little paragraph statement on what I heard. Are you guys using our comments?
We don't have the capacity to monitor social media.
Okay.
So we're going to need to talk to you, and that's why we have, thank you for bringing that up, first of all, but that's why we have officers and detectives here to take that type of statement. We can follow up and check the social media to verify the date and time that was put out there. But we need you all to communicate with us on these things. And you're welcome to put it on social media, that's your right, but we need that communication. I also want to clarify some things. And a lot of this is common sense. But the piece that I really wanted to enforce, if you see something, say something. That area is allowable to hunt on. And let's just clear the air. The level of hunting that is going on there, from what I understand, is bird hunt, like dove hunting. Okay, let's be clear with that. Those are bird shot shotguns. Okay, they're not, pistols. They're not muzzle loaders, even though muzzle loaders are allowed. That type of shooting is occurring when I'm hearing 6 to 8 in the morning. 3 hunters out there, and you're hearing that type of shot. That is most often going to be bird shot shotgun, okay, and that it has a distance, but it's going up in the air, and I've been in that area where that bird shot comes down and it falls on your shoulders, and that's what it does, bird shot. It's not another type of round. I know we're putting a lot of emphasis on the hunting, okay, and we don't want to give out any more. But I wouldn't put my focus or the emphasis on that hunting when people are out there bird shot, using bird shot and shooting at dove. I don't think that's I don't think that's what occurred here. The bird shot would have never made it to the homes that were struck.
I would agree with you. I think the average resident, though, that doesn't hunt is going to have a hard time distinguishing between a shotgun and a rifle. They are distinct, and I think a lot of us that know what rifles sound like knew that we were hearing rifle shots on Saturday, which was not the norm. And insinuating here, I don't believe that was a hunter that was doing that. That was someone that was doing something irresponsible at the very least. But,
thank you.
So, but I think just for everybody in this room, if we're going to call, you're going to get a lot of calls on just regular shotgun. And I know already with the presentation, it's not like you guys have a large force. We have you run out for every shotgun blast. Isn't going to be productive either. So,
and the call is that we want to record it. Maybe we don't get there right away, and with the staff we got, don't expect us to respond to everyone. So you say, yeah, we called you and you didn't show up. Yeah. Doesn't mean it wasn't recorded. And we do have our areas where we sometimes strategically staff a vehicle for presence. So we may not get there in within that half hour on multiple calls that we believe are bird shot, but doesn't mean we don't stop in the parking lot on their way out to check up on them either. I mean, that's what I mean. Let's apply common sense to this. We're not going to respond red lights and siren. But now you're talking about what occurred on Saturday, and that is different.
And there's a couple of questions here, but I also want to point out too, just one of the things that, although we might not be able to immediately come out, we try as best as possible to provide feedback to people when they call, like this is what we found, this is what we encountered, and so whenever possible, we would like that opportunity, number one, document that call, and data collection. Unfortunately, sometimes that removes the human element of the experience, right? The perception, the fear, and everything like that, and taking that out, and we don't want to reduce things down just to numbers. But some of the things that we're talking about in the room tonight, whether it's for hunting or just understanding what the type of activity is, having that data point to know that we've received these calls gives us some measure of value, right? But the one piece of providing feedback, like as Chief mentioned, we might not be able to respond and check right away, but we might be able to inform that caller that, hey, this is a legal hunting season. I drove through there earlier this afternoon. There were 3 hunters that were out there and those types of things, or at 6 o'clock in the morning. And just to kind of get everybody thinking about, you know, what's likely going on. You know, and now if we get 10 calls and we have 10 people saying this is a rifle, this is definitely a rifle, or it's automatic gunfire, then obviously that's going to change our calculation here as to getting over there sooner than later.
The point that I wanted, I'm sorry, and I know that Alder Strassman has another comment. The point I wanted to bring up.
My question.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, was there any way we could have the feedback to know what kind of shots were fired, just to give people peace of mind, and also they know what they're listening to eventually. And I think it would bring a little bit of the fear and things down a little bit.
Can I say something? I'm a former Army officer. All right, I was a captain. What I heard on Saturday night was absolutely a rifle. If I had to narrow it down to a caliber, I would say it was a .223. Okay.
So I think the point that you're making out there is just in the future.
I'm just saying in general, I wasn't saying Saturday night.
Yep.
I realize that's a totally different thing. I'm just saying for like the hunting purposes, when we hear those during the day, if people call, if there was a way that we could give feedback and let people know, no, those were 3 hunters, we know that they were out there, there were 3, you know, I think it would give people ease. I'm not talking about Saturday.
Yeah, and again,
Saturday is a totally different related incident.
Yep. And so you're just building off the comment that I made. And again,
Right.
I always, if you know me from speaking at the neighborhood association before, I always like to frame expectations here, right? And so we strive to be able to have that contact as much as possible, and I think a little bit can go a long way, kind of opening up lines of communication here. Ma'am, you've very patiently been, I'm surprised you haven't started shouting out yet, so.
I just had a couple questions about the investigation, whether or not they're utilizing like Crime Stoppers, or if there's any possibility for reward for information, because somebody out there knows someone that has, you know, done this, and
This has been on the news Sunday, on Monday, and on Monday we put out 2 different bleeps to the media to pass that information on. One thing that I think got confusing in what I said also is the see something, say something. We have people here speculating on your comments. Let's just say you're 100% right. So if you would have saw somebody walking in the woods with that type of weapon, would you have called the police?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. You know, it's people seeing things, but, you know, they may not report it saying, oh, they're probably going hunting. You don't know what, sometimes it's our gut that tells us something, and that's what I'm asking for. If you see something that you believe is suspicious, is that piece.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that we need to understand as a community is that seeing something is one thing, and then hearing things and the way that when you hear gunshots, and they could be in the distance. You don't know. Like, I know that they were coming from the north, but how far? How far from them? You know.
Right, and so to your point, we're not able to act on things that we don't know about. And as we talked about, 36 square miles, we have 4 to 6 officers working. We can't be in every corner of the city all the times. And so having that information, every neighborhood presentation that I go to, I encourage everyone to take out your phone right now if you haven't already, if you don't already have your phone, our non-emergency number programmed in there. But I tell this story jokingly. People go on Google and they end up calling Fitchburg, Massachusetts. All the time. And so we've become so reliant on our phones to search when we need it. That means you're that much less likely to call. And this goes beyond just hearing gunshots, all right? We've talked in your neighborhood and many neighborhoods about property crime prevention. You see a car driving down your street at 3 o'clock in the morning with no headlights on, and you see people running back and forth from that car. I don't know for sure, but I'm highly likelihood that it's not a state journal being delivered at that time. Those are the kinds of things that we want to know about. So again, it's building that sense in you. Your neighborhood has been phenomenal over the last couple of years, turning on the lights in the carriage lanes, communicating with one another, and again, being proactive and having that sense of community to understand, like, hey, I heard a bunch of gunshots. I know my neighbor is able to kind of be an expert and has some expertise. I'm going to go and ask him real quick and see if he's heard those, what he thinks. And if you're not certain, at the end of the day, we'd rather have you call us and we can figure it out.
I can tell you I've gotten a number of emails from people looking for the Fitchburg, Massachusetts mayor as well.
I just want to say one thing too, as I don't think it will make anybody feel too much better, but I live on Buttonbush and Big Blue Stem, like, feel very exposed in that corner, and I'm right up against the setback line. But I've been there for 14 years, and I've never had a problem with hunters, and I've never been scared about what I've heard. And this weekend, I'm probably going to drink beer in my backyard, and I'm not worried about it. But one thing that I think people don't realize, and I didn't know until tonight, that a bullet can travel miles. And I know that when you're sitting in my bedroom, you can see the Dairy Queen Plaza and that whole area over there. And I'm sure the officers can tell you that even though we're having this meeting tonight, because this is the first time in 14 years this has happened, if they had a meeting every time gunshots were fired or hit something in that neighborhood, it would be much more frequent. So I feel very safe in our neighborhood. I continue to feel very safe in our neighborhood. I'm glad we're looking into this. A dumbass is going to do something dumb a second time, and they're going to get caught. So I don't know. That's just my general observation of the situation.
All set. And we're coming to your house Saturday.
How long does the bird season last?
Depending on, I mean, the waterfowl season is probably the longest season, and mid-December. Yeah, I think the goose season was a little bit longer than the actual duck season, but December-ish. Yeah, I think goose might actually run into early January, late December.
Can you speak to the Goodland Park significance? It was a board call, but not a hit.
Well, I think one of the things that Lieutenant Hartwood was referencing was the fact that we did not get any calls related from Goodland Park on the first volley that happened around 5 o'clock. We got a call from Goodland Park, so that sound or those parties could have been in a completely different spot, which would have elicited the response at 8 o'clock at night.
I just have a question really quick about night hunting, because that was something that on the Facebook page that people were asking about. I know obviously it makes sense to me that no one's going to be really hunting probably birds at night, and with what's legal there, they would be going after coyotes. So it sounds like that would be really rare in this area. But if somebody wants to night hunt, is that a special permit, or no, they can just go out and do that?
Yeah, so with night hunting, it's just covered under the same small game license, whether it's coyote or raccoon, fox, they're all covered under small game. Generally, with raccoon, it's, they utilize dogs. I wouldn't expect somebody to be back there raccoon hunting. With coyote or fox, the prairie land, being the high ground, might be a place where somebody would go out with a caller, try and call coyote or fox in, but with that higher grass, it might be difficult to see them too. So I can honestly say I don't think I've ever encountered anybody night hunting out there. Could happen, but.
Well, I'll add that Sunday morning at 4 a.m., because I looked at the clock, I did hear a single shot at
Not out of the realm of possibility.
6:30 or 7 Sunday morning also.
Okay, one more.
I know that when I heard, I wasn't home at that 6:30 time frame, so I didn't hear those shots, but I was home by about 7, and I did hear those shots around 8 o'clock, and then it sounded like someone was shooting off fireworks after that. Mm-hmm. So my question is, are fireworks legal or not? If we hear fireworks, should we be calling the police? Because a lot of times they sound like gunfire, and then sometimes you'll actually see explosions or anything, but I'm just not really clear, and my dog really does not like fireworks at all, and it could be a very stressful time in my house. I like fireworks, but...
The general rule is if they leave the ground or go boom, they're illegal in the state of Wisconsin. So the things that leave the ground and explode, that are usually confused with gunshots, those are illegal.
So you have calls then for illegal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 4th of July, obviously, as you can imagine, we have numerous calls, and again, resource capacity issues. But yeah, they are illegal, and if they're creating an issue, we absolutely want to come on and address that as best as possible.
The staff will be here for a little while. The other alders will be here. If you have further questions, feel free to come up and ask anything like that. Thank you very much for setting this up again.
Yeah.
Thank you all.